There is a moment Clifton Powell has described in interviews where a casting director looked him up and down and told him, directly, no pretense, that he was too dark to play the lead. Not that he wasn't talented enough, not that he wasn't right for the part, that his skin was the wrong shade. And Clifton Powell, a man who would go on to accumulate over 250 screen credits, who voiced one of the most iconic video game characters of the 21st century, who held his own on-screen opposite Jamie Foxx, Eddie Murphy, and Samuel L. Jackson. That man went home and sat with that. The story of Clifton Powell is the story of what happens to a black man in Hollywood when the industry treats your face as a liability. It is a story of decades of clawing, losing everything, getting back up, facing accusations that nearly destroyed him, being vindicated, and still showing up to work. He turned 69 years old in March 2025. And what he has said recently about his life, about love, about what he's only now beginning to understand, is more honest than anything most actors his age would dare say on camera. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to Washington, D.C., the boy from D.C. who wouldn't shut up. Clifton Powell was born on March 16, 1956, in Washington, D.C. He grew up Catholic, attending St. Anthony Catholic School, and by all accounts he was the kind of kid who filled every room he walked into. Teachers noticed it, other students noticed it, and the moment it crystallized into something real was when the school performed My Fair Lady. Powell was maybe 12 years old. He walked up to the director after a performance and said he wanted to be in the show, but he told them he wasn't going to sing. No singing. He'd act, he'd be present, but singing was off the table. They gave him the role of General Bull Moose in Lil Abner. He got on that stage, and whatever happened there was enough to tell him, this is the thing. He was accepted into Workshops for Careers in the Arts, a program in D.C. designed specifically for artistically gifted teenagers. The structure was unusual. Mornings were standard academic classes, and afternoons were devoted entirely to acting, movement, voice work, and craft. For a teenager who had already decided what he wanted, it was like being handed a key. From there, he enrolled at Emerson College in Boston, Massachusetts, earning a degree in speech and education. Emerson is not a throwaway school for theater. It produced Norman Lear, Jay Leno, Henry Winkler, and Dennis Leary, among many others. Powell graduated and moved to New York City in 1979. He would not make real money as an actor for another 30 years. He said so himself. 10 years in New York, going nowhere and learning everything. From 1979 to 1989, Powell lived in New York. He was on stage as much as he could be. He played roles in The Mighty Gents, Zoomin' and The Sign, Langston, and toured nationally with the Negro Ensemble Company's production of A Soldier's Play. He worked as a speech counselor in summer youth programs to pay his bills. He did commercials. He did anything that kept him close to the craft while keeping the lights on. The Negro Ensemble Company, for those who don't know, was one of the most significant black theater institutions in American history. Founded in 1967 by playwright Douglas Turner Ward, it trained and launched the careers of an entire generation of black actors. Denzel Washington, Samuel L. Jackson, Lawrence Fishburne all came through those same doors. Clifton Powell was in those rooms. He was learning from the people who built the framework, but New York stage was one thing, Hollywood was another. In 1989, after a decade of theater and commercials, Powell looked at his bank account and made the decision that a lot of New York theater actors eventually face. He moved west. He was 33 years old. I was doing a lot of commercials and the stage, he said later, and I wasn't making a great living. I didn't go to California to be a movie star, but to do some TV and make a living at it. His first gig in Los Angeles was a play called Fraternity, which put him on the road. When that run ended, he came back to L.A. and started the grind. His first real Hollywood break came in 1990, in a film called House Party. He was 34. Most actors who break through in Hollywood do it in their 20s. Clifton Powell was just getting started, and what was waiting for him on the other side of that breakthrough would be equal parts extraordinary and brutal. Pinky, Dead Presidents, and The Price of Being Too Dark. The early 1990s changed things. In 1991, Powell landed a recurring role on the Fox TV series ROC, playing a powerful drug dealer named Andre. He has said that rock is what put him on the map. It gave Hollywood producers a reference point. There is that guy, the one you remember, the one who made you lean forward. Then came 1993. Menace II Society, directed by the Hughes brothers, was a film that hit American cinema like something unscheduled and necessary. It was raw, specific, and devastating, and Clifton Powell was in it. That same year, he appeared in Dead Presidents, another Hughes brothers film set against the backdrop of the Vietnam War and its aftermath in black urban America. He was building something, and then came Friday. In 1995, Ice Cube's Friday was released. Powell played Pinky, a neighborhood figure, comedic, deeply recognizable, the kind of character you don't forget. The movie became a cult landmark almost immediately. When Next Friday came out in 2000 and Friday After Next in 2002, Powell reprised the role both times. If you grew up watching those films, Pinky is locked somewhere in your memory permanently, but alongside the success, Powell was quietly fighting something most people didn't see. In multiple interviews, he has spoken about colorism in Hollywood, the industry practice of favoring lighter-skinned black actors over darker-skinned ones for lead roles. One casting director told him flat out that he was too dark to be the lead. He was handed villain roles, drug dealer roles, sidekick roles, not because he wasn't capable of carrying a film, but because of the specific shade of his skin. "I was told I was too dark," he said in a 2025 interview covered by Revolt TV. He recalled being turned away from roles he was otherwise perfectly suited for, denied them because of a bias so embedded in the industry that some people delivering those verdicts didn't even recognize it as bias. They thought they were being practical. In 2004, two things happened that represent the strange arithmetic of Clifton Powell's career. He appeared in Ray, the Taylor Hackford biopic starring Jamie Foxx, in a supporting role that put him in front of Oscar audiences. And that same year, he voiced Big Smoke, Melvin Harris, the big, hungry, treacherous antagonist of Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. Big Smoke is one of the most quoted video game characters in history. "I'll have 2 number 9s, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip, a number 7, 2 number 45s, 1 with cheese, and a large soda." That line, that delivery, that's Clifton Powell's voice, coming out of a fictional gangster in a fictional Los Santos, and it is burned into the memory of an entire generation of gamers who were teenagers in 2004 and are now approaching 40. He never became the lead. He became something harder to define, essential. The actor whose presence in a film tells you the film means business. But he had still not made serious money. And things were about to get significantly worse. The decade that almost took everything. Let's be precise about what Powell has said publicly because he's been startlingly candid about it. In interviews, he has said he lost approximately $10 million during the breakdown of his marriage, not because of a bad investment or a failed business venture, but because of how he was living, his own words, partying, drinking heavily, gambling, and other women. He didn't frame it as a conspiracy or point fingers anywhere but at himself. $10 million is not an abstract number. That is houses, security, retirement, legacy. And he lost it. Then, in August 2011, something happened that threatened not just his finances but his entire reputation. On the night of August 28, 2011, at Harrah's Casino in New Orleans, a woman using the pseudonym Keontae Myers, a 24-year-old cocktail waitress, alleged that Clifton Powell raped her in a hotel room. According to a lawsuit eventually filed in federal court, Myers stated that the encounter was initially consensual, but that later that night she declined further sexual contact, and Powell allegedly did not stop. Myers reported the incident to New Orleans police. A detective named Demita Williams was assigned to the case and conducted an investigation. The criminal case was closed. When asked during that investigation whether she had been forced or intimidated into sexual intercourse with Powell, Myers reportedly replied, "No." In 2020, a civil lawsuit in federal court in Louisiana, seeking damages exceeding $75,000. Powell's representative told TMZ at the time, "Mr. Powell absolutely denies these false accusations and plans on pursuing all legal remedies available to him against his accuser." What followed over the next several years was one of the more convoluted legal stories you'll find in entertainment news. Powell did not respond to the civil lawsuit. Not because he conceded anything, but apparently because he was never properly served with it in the first place. In 2013, because he hadn't answered the complaint, a judge entered a default judgment against him for $150,000 in damages plus $3,095 in medical expenses. So, no criminal charges, no arrest, a closed police investigation in which the assigned detective said the claims were unfounded, and yet a $150 zero civil judgment sitting on Powell's public record because of a procedural failure in how the lawsuit was delivered to him. He carried that for 4 years. In January 2017, Judge Sarah S. Vance vacated the default judgment. The court found that Myers had inconsistencies in her account and, critically, that Powell had never been properly served with the lawsuit. The judgment was thrown out. Powell was cleared the same day. Speaking to reporters at LAX after the ruling, Powell said the 4-year ordeal had caused tremendous collateral damage. Even though he had been vindicated, he'd lost roles, he'd lost opportunities, he'd had his name attached to a $150,000 rape judgment on public court records for the better part of half a decade, even though he was never criminally charged, and the detective who investigated said the claims were unfounded. The story didn't get nearly as much coverage when he was cleared as it did when the allegation first broke. That tends to be how it goes, coming back at 60 when most people are coasting. Here is what Clifton Powell did after all of that. He went back to work. In 2016, he was cast as Rex Fisher, the central antagonist of Saints Key Age Sinners, Bounce TV's first-ever primetime soap opera. He played Rex for 40 episodes across 6 seasons, opposite Vanessa Bell Calloway and Gloria Rubin. The show ran until 2022. For much of the late 2010s, Rex Fisher was the role people were discovering or rediscovering Clifton Powell through. Rex is not a simple character. He's a tough man who grew up alongside the pastor at the heart of the show but took a different road. Powell has talked about how he tries to find the real human thing inside characters like that, not to excuse them but to understand them. He won multiple NAACP Theater Awards over the course of his career, including Best Actor for The Talented 10th at the Hudson Theater in Los Angeles, and another NAACP Theater Award for Best Actor for David E. Talbert's The Fabric of a Man, where he shared the stage with Shamar Moore. He's also appeared on BET's The Family Business, Black Lightning on the CW, Hawaii Five-0, CSI, NYPD Blue, House MD, The Jamie Foxx Show. The list goes on for so long it starts to feel like a roll call of the last 30 years of American television. In a 2016 profile in Simply Buckhead, written when he was 60, Powell came across as a man busier than he'd ever been. He was talking about paying forward everything he'd learned. He wasn't thinking about slowing down, he was thinking about who came next. When asked about retirement in a 2021 interview with Parade, he said, "I think this business retires you," which is either wisdom or stubbornness, possibly both at 69, learning to love. The most recent chapter of Clifton Powell's story is in some ways the most unexpected one. In early 2026, Powell appeared in a roundtable discussion covered by Yahoo Entertainment. He was approaching his 70th birthday, and instead of talking about his career highlights or his upcoming projects, he said something that stopped the conversation. He is only now, at nearly 70, learning to love. He spoke about his emotional development, about the gaps in himself that he is only recently beginning to understand and address. For a man who spent decades playing hard men, drug dealers, antagonists, powerful figures who bend others to their will, that kind of honesty is striking. He didn't qualify it heavily. He didn't frame it as a promotional moment for something he was selling. He just said it, "This is where I am." When you put that next to everything else, the couch-surfing years in New York in the 1980s, the decade of building in Los Angeles while getting turned away because of his complexion, the financial devastation of his divorce, the 4 years of carrying a public rape judgment that was eventually vacated, the slow and steady rebuilding through Saints Teach A Sinners and 100 other projects, you start to see the shape of what he's describing. He has spent most of his life performing for other people while something quieter went unattended. He said himself that he wasn't making real money from acting until his 50s. His estimated net worth in 2025 sits at approximately $500,000, a figure that, for someone with his credits and his 4+ decades in the industry, speaks directly to the kind of financial turbulence he has described openly. He has 2 children, Maya and Clifton Jr., and 2 grandchildren named Eliza and Rashad Jr., His home is in Atlanta, what Clifton Powell's story actually means, 4+ decades, more than 250 screen credits, NAACP awards for stage acting, the voice of Big Smoke, Menace II Society, Pinky, Ray, Dead Presidents, Rush Hour, Saints Eat Sinners, Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas, and a man who, at 69, is sitting in interview chairs talking about how he's only now figuring out what love is. There is a version of this story that gets told as a rise and fall narrative. The money lost, the allegations, the years of being passed over for lead roles because of his skin tone. But that framing misses something. Clifton Powell never fell because he never stopped working. He was at LAX giving a press statement after being cleared of a $150,000 civil judgment on his way to the next job. He was 60 years old and landing a starring role in a new television series. He was learning his craft in black theater institutions in the 1980s before most of his peers had even moved to Los Angeles. What happened to him in Hollywood, the colorism, the typecasting, the systemic preference for a different kind of face, is not unique to him. He is one of dozens, probably hundreds, of talented black actors of his generation who were handed a narrower lane and told to stay in it. What is specific to Powell is what he did with that lane. He made it wider by sheer repetition, by showing up so consistently in so many different kinds of projects that eventually the range spoke for itself. In 2004, he was in an Oscar-nominated film and he voiced a video game character that teenagers are still quoting 20 years later. Those two things happened in the same calendar year. That is the career of Clifton Powell. He is 69 years old, still working, still talking, still honest in ways that most people in his industry can't afford to be. Whether he continues working or eventually steps back, one thing is already certain: the credits exist. The performances exist. Big Smoke exists. Pinky exists. And the story of what he had to go through to get there, the rejection, the accusations, the loss, the slow rebuild, that story deserves to be told in full. So the question I want to leave you with is this: if Clifton Powell had been cast differently from the start, if Hollywood's colorism hadn't redirected him away from leading roles, what kind of leading man do you think he could have become? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. If this kind of deep dive storytelling is what you're here for, subscribing takes about 2 seconds, and it means the next one lands directly in your feed.